I would like to start by welcoming everyone. Welcome to LSAT. My name is Logan Reifstack, and I'm a graduate student in the Educational Counseling Program here at CSUB. I am pleased to introduce a video featuring Dr. Jeanine Kraybill, Associate Professor of Political Science and Director of CSUB's Pre-Law Program. If you have been thinking about law school, Dr. Kraybill's video will give you insight on what to expect from application till graduation. So without further ado, I'm going to pull that video up for us.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Jeanine Kraybill, and I'm an Associate Professor of Political Science at CSU Bakersfield, and I'm also the Pre-Law Program Director for the campus. And I'm here to talk to you about the law school admissions process. So today we're going to be doing a general overview of the components of the process and some of the things that you should be thinking about as you discern a Juris Doctorate, a career in the law, and essentially what steps you need to take in regards to getting there. So what we're going to do now is go over to some slides that I have prepared for you. And we're just going to take some time to walk through these together. So again, the purpose of this presentation is just to provide for you the basics of the law school admissions process. Very first thing that you should be considering is, why do I want to go to law school? And when you think about that, it doesn't mean that you have to have everything figured out. You don't need to know what type of law you want to practice. As a matter of fact, if you think you know what type of law you want to practice, that may very well change when you get into law school and you start taking different classes and you do clinics and different types of internships. So I would encourage you to have a sense as to why you want to go to law school, but definitely remain open to different possibilities, fields, and opportunities when you're there. But before you get there, let's talk about some things that you need to do. One of the things you need to think about is what legal field you might be interested in. The reason why you want to do that, along with is law school the best path for you, is because there are absolutely some careers that lend themselves to you getting a law degree. There are some careers that are related to the legal field or the courts, either kind of directly or tangentially, that don't necessarily require you to get a Juris Doctorate, a law degree. So you want to really take some time and sit with yourself and think, do I want to be an attorney? Is this something that I want to do? Or is there a facet of the courts or the law that I'm interested in, and maybe I need to be on a different educational path? For example, perhaps you're into alternative dispute resolution and you want to be a mediator in family court. Most mediators in family court have a social work background, and then they've completed mediation training. For that, you may work with attorneys, and you definitely work with parties as they try to civilly resolve a dispute. But mediators in and of themselves are not attorneys, nor did they have to go through a Juris Doctorate program. So that's why I'm saying it's important. I always tell students to weed things in and weed things out. And before you get into this committed field of study post-college, you'll really want to think about it, because it is going to demand more of your time, your resources, sacrifices away from family, and it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. But you know what it is that makes you happy and what you're passionate about. So really sit with yourself and think about what it is I want to do and why does the legal field interest me? Perhaps you had an experience and you saw the vital need for attorneys. Perhaps you served on a jury and you saw the importance of the court system. Might be something in your family background, might be something in your professional background. But what that all gets to, particularly when you're writing your personal statement for a law school, is the measure of fit. Does this individual understand, the basics of what attorneys do? Do they see themselves in the field? Is this the correct education and career path for them? The other thing that you need to think about realistically is the cost of attending law school. Average cost of attending a public law school as a resident in a state runs about $28,000 a year. Going to a private law school out of state will run you about double that. And so you want to be cognizant of how much time this may take you to pay back after law school. Now, within regards to law school, if you are working on your GPA, that's a very good thing, as is, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, LSAT prep, because for merit-based scholarship funding, those are still the two predominant factors that law schools look at: your GPA and your LSAT score. And it's also a timing issue as to when you apply. Even though, some students may wait to a spring application deadline, I always encourage students, if possible, if the ideal works, to try to get in their application complete and done in November, because that is also too when that pot of merit-based funding is the biggest and the freshest. And if you got a good LSAT score and a strong GPA, that's going to make you competitive for funding and help with cost. There's also, depending on the school, there may be different types of scholarships. So that's definitely something that you're going to want to look into as you research law school options. Another thing that you want to think about is location. And with location, I'm also going to talk about type of law school, and that also folds into the previous bullet of costs. In the state of California, for example, and CSU Bakersfield is in the state of California, so I'm going to be talking about it from that perspective. If someone is watching this from outside of the state of California, you'll want to look at your state and what types of options they have for legal education. But in the state of California, we have American Bar Associated or Accredited, American Bar Accredited ABA schools. And that's a national accreditation. There are certain requirements with regards to the law school's library, the faculty, student body, the facility that law school has to have and able to get that status. If you go to an ABA law school, what is advantageous about that is you can essentially sit for the bar nearly anywhere in the United States and be a practicing attorney. And in California, we have, many ABA law schools and fairly reputable ones across the state. We also have something called state bar accredited law schools here in California, and they are accredited by the State Bar of Examiners in California. So they are accredited, but they don't have the national accreditation status. They have a state bar accreditation status. They tend to be about half the cost of an ABA law school. People that go to state bar accredited law schools usually do because they're regionally committed to the area that school tends to be in. So say you may be working, you might have a family, different types of considerations, and you want to go to law school, but for various reasons, you're not able to go out of state or to a different area of the state, and your region has a state bar accredited law school. For that, you can finish your Juris Doctorate program, sit for the bar exam, and apply for the state bar to become a licensed and barred attorney here in California and practice alongside individuals who went to an ABA school. The only thing is that if you move or you desire to practice outside of the state of California and you went to a state bar accredited law school, you're going to have to wait some time before you sit for that bar, and you'll have to follow whatever state you move to, their requirements. And so you don't have as much flexibility as you do with an ABA school. Like I said, people for different reasons go to different schools because of what fits their situation. I've had students who have gone out of state to ABA schools, returned back to California to practice, students who are away at ABA schools now, students who are in the state of California at ABA schools, and I have students that are at state accredited schools, all doing very well. It just depends on their situation in terms of the costs that they're looking to inhibit, perhaps location-wise where they're committed. And bringing that up, location. Another thing is to think about where you want to practice law, right? If you're wanting to practice outside the state of California, you need to go to an ABA law school. If you're going to practice, say, for example, in the Central Valley, you may decide to go to a state bar accredited law school in the Central Valley. If you're looking to practice at a top civil or criminal defense firm, you may want to look at an ABA law school within the state of California. So I really encourage you to make sure that you're looking at your various options. I always advise to students, what you want to make sure is that you're going to an accredited law school. And again, here in California, we have state bar accredited law schools, and we have American Bar Association accredited law schools. Both have to go through rigorous standards. It's just that ABA is going to give you more flexibility in terms of being able to practice outside of the state, or perhaps be more competitive for top law firms in the state, where upon entry getting hired, that can matter at times to an employer. But I have worked with attorneys and judges who have gone through both types of legal educational paths and have very successful careers. So, but that is something definitely to consider. Another thing with regards to location is where you go to law school is where you tend to network with that region's bar association. That's where you'll probably get some of your first internships. So envisioning where you're planning on working is important in terms of where you decide to go to a law school, because that's where some of your first networking will occur, and you will be in some ways dependent on that networking base when you graduate law school. Another thing to think about is the time commitment in regards to law school. So if you go to a full-time program, which most ABA accredited schools are, you're looking at a 3-year program. Your first year, most ABA law schools do not permit you to work. If you go to a part-time program, which many of the state bar accredited law schools are, you're looking at about 3.5 to 4 years. And they do permit you to work, and usually they operate in an evening type basis, where ABA they'll have classes during the day, afternoon, some in the evening, things of that nature. But law school is a very big time commitment, whether you are going full-time or you're working and going part-time. It is a lot of reading. It's a lot of analysis. It's a lot of drilling yourselves on concept with the law. Law school teaches you how to think like a lawyer, going out and your internships and then going out and actually practicing law is going to teach you how to be a lawyer. But law school is teaching you how to think of the world differently, how to think about how issues and disputes arise, how you would resolve them. It really employs a lot of critical thinking skills, synthesizing skills. And so it's important to think about your time commitment, because it is something that will take an immense amount of time for the duration that you are in it. And that means sacrifices, right? So thinking about your family situation. Are you more of a traditional student where you have some independent flexibility right now? Are you committed with either work or a family? These are all things that you need to consider. And I'm here to tell you that regardless of your situation, law school is very doable, but you'll want to find the program that fits best for you and where you are right now in your life, so that you do well and that you succeed. You also want to think about resources. So again, you're going to want to try to get your application in as early as possible in the application cycle, because that is when that pot of scholarship funding is the freshest. But if you can't, the world isn't over. There still can be funding available. You'll want to also, as much as possible, particularly if you're going for an ABA school, to try to really work on your GPA. If your GPA needs to be strong right now, work on getting it better. Work on taking rigorous classes. When law schools are looking at your transcripts, they're not necessarily looking at which major that you studied in, but they're looking at the rigor of your classes. So that's really important to think about. But all that is going to help you in regards to what type of applicant and candidate you are, and then it can impact merit-based funding. So you want to be aware of that. You also want to contact the schools and see what type of unique scholarships to their program that they may have that you might be able to apply for. Another thing is, and this is related to the top, 2 bullets, is what's driving you. Really sitting and discerning with yourself as to why you want to become an attorney will be invaluable to you. And the reason why is because, like I said, you're going to have to write a personal statement. It's brief. It's no more than 2 pages, double spaced. But the law school is going to want to have a sense that you've seriously considered this big step, and that you could see yourself in law school and the law school can see yourself in law school. So those are just some preliminary things for you to first think about as you are making this journey. Okay, let's kind of talk about some first steps. So one of the first things that you're going to want to do is get acquainted with the Law School Admissions Council. And you're going to want to go to lsac.org and make a student account. It's free of charge, but it's going to give you a treasure trove of information when it comes to law school admission date testing, different ways that the LSAT has changed. In the last couple of years, it has changed. One of the biggest changes in 2019 is that it went digital. Even back then, when pre-pandemic, we were testing in person, it went from hard copy to digital copy. Now, since COVID-19 and really probably through most of 2022, we are seeing the LSAT administered online, and it's administered through the LSAC's Hub Law program, and it's proctored by ProctorU, where they take over your computer to make sure that you're not looking at any notes and that you're having a non-biased and impartial testing experience. But you're going to want to go to the lsac.org because they'll always have all of those updates with regards to the platform the test is being administered in, and testing dates. And testing dates are becoming more frequent. There were time periods where they were only offered about half a dozen times a year. Now they're offered more. And so you'll want to make sure that you are going to the LSAC website to get information about that. Another thing too with the LSAC website is that you can get information on attending law school fairs. So usually every November, for example, there's one in Los Angeles, and around the same time, there's one in Northern California, where law schools from all over the country assemble. And on a Saturday, they're there to essentially give prospective students information about their programs. Also during law school fairs, there tends to be workshops with regards to financial aid, the application process. Sometimes there's even pre-law advisors from different undergraduate institutions on hand for you to talk to with regards to how you're discerning the law and your application. So the very first thing you want to do is make sure that you go to the lsac.org website, make yourself a student account, peruse the website, look at what they have to offer. There's free diagnostic tests available, so you can kind of get a baseline of where you're at with the LSAT. The LSAT is the law school admission test. So all ABA schools are going to require it. Some are starting to permit the GRE, which is usually utilized for graduate school admissions, but the LSAT still tends to be the main test that law schools are using in assessing your application for admission into their school. Some state schools will waive the requirement for the LSAT, but that's on a case-by-case basis, and you'll want to contact that state bar accredited law school. But I would encourage you to take the LSAT. If you study and you prepare for it and you do well, it could really help you in terms of that merit-based funding that we were talking about. The other thing to keep in mind with regards to the LSAC is that they also have different scholarships that can help with the application cost and specifically within their diversity form. So when you go on to the LSAC and you click on the diversity form, it'll have information as a way to support first-generation students and first-generation students of color. So you're going to want to make sure that you go through there. We'll talk about the LSAT and the components of it in just a little bit. Right now, what I'm wanting you to really understand is go onto the LSAC website, start perusing it and getting comfortable with this free resource for you. Another thing, like I said, when you are getting acquainted with the LSAT, is you're going to want to, at the same time, in the region that you're thinking about attending law school, look at the American Bar Accredited or State Bar Accredited schools. You can go to calbar.org, that's our California Bar website, and it will actually list for you all of the American Bar Association schools and all of the State Bar Accredited schools, and that's calbar.org. One thing that you're going to want to start thinking about is both your test prep and your timeline with regards to the application process. And so that's also another important reason to go to the lsac.org, because there is information on the kind of traditional timeline to apply to law school. As I stated, there's some free diagnostic tests. You can create a Law Hub account, and that's actually the account now that you'll go through to take the LSAT online, since that's how it's being administered. And then the other thing that I would encourage you to do is to visit the Khan Academy. The Khan Academy online does offer free LSAT prep, and it enables you to take a diagnostic test to see where you are at. Now let's go ahead and talk about some of the components of the application process. So as I stated, the first thing that you're going to need to decide is if you are going to take the the LSAT or the GRE. The GRE is the graduate requirement exam for graduate school. So if you're looking to get into a master's program or perhaps a PhD program, that reading comprehension, there's some quantitative and a bit of a quantitative analysis statistics on that exam. That's the traditional exam that you take to get into graduate school. Law school is assessing different skills. And so that's why the LSAT has been a different exam for students that are applying into law school. They're looking at your analogical and logical and critical thinking skills as a way to say, okay, where's this person at with these skills and will they be able to get through law school? However, the LSAT for some institutions isn't necessarily the end all be all, and we're seeing a bit of a culture change, hence why some schools have moved to the GRE. What you're going to want to do is, as you research law schools, and I always tell students when you're researching law schools, you should think of about 5 or 6 you want to apply to. And, at the top, you have your dream school. And then maybe the bottom 2 are safety nets. And then somewhere in the middle where you think you can be competitive. And then what you're going to want to do is go to their websites and look at what was the average GPA for the most recent class they just admitted into their law school. So usually the year before you're applying. And what was the median LSAT score? And those will give you baselines to target to make yourself competitive for funding. Now, if you don't reach those metrics, don't get disheartened. There's other parts of your application that make you a whole good candidate that the law school will be looking at. The other thing too is you'll want to see with regards to the LSAT if you're eligible for a fee waiver. And for that, you'll want to go to the LSAC and apply through the diversity program to do that. Now, let's talk about the application. So the application for law school consists of several items. One is the law school admissions test. And the law school admissions test consists of 4 components. 3 that are scored, 1 that is unscored. It also is about a 4-hour exam. Each section is 35 minutes, and between the second and the third section, test takers are permitted to have a 10-minute intermission. You have an analogical reasoning session, and what that section does is it assesses your ability to synthesize rules and facts and determine what is true or what the best outcome would be. And that is something that you will be doing in your legal educational career when you're looking at cases and trying to synthesize a rule from them. You also have the logical reasoning section. And the logical reasoning section will assess your different kind of critical thinking ability and give you different scenarios to work through. Then you also have a reading comprehension component, and then you'll also have an essay component. And the essay component is another writing example, writing sample that the law schools will be able to look at. So that's what that serves for. Now, sometimes what you'll notice in your law school admissions test is that you might be given an extra analogical reasoning section or an extra logical reasoning section. And sometimes if you get a duplicate on one of those sections, it's because the LSAC is actually testing out some questions. But again, it's 4 components. 3 are scored, 1 is unscored. You're going to have a reading comprehension, a written essay, which is now it's a separate component that you can take 8 days before you take the multiple choice component, and that consists of the analogical, the logical, and the reading comprehension. And so what I would advise you to do is to start getting as comfortable as possible with the LSAT. I also would recommend that if you at times struggle with taking tests, or especially kinds of standardized tests, you're definitely going to want to make sure that you invest in some type of test prep. I actually say that to anybody across the board. There's different types of test prep that you can do. And, most of our students here at CSUB have, and especially with COVID, it has accelerated, tend to do them online. And there's various packages, whether you go through Princeton Review, Kaplan, or Blueprint. those tend to be the main ones that our students sign up for to take. They do, depending on the package you get, the baseline price tends to be about $1,000. Some can go higher, a little higher than that. You're going to want to look for a program where you have access to tests so that you are taking tests regularly. There are synchronous models, asynchronous models. Think about how you learn best. I know for someone like myself, I would like an instructor so I could be asking questions. So you're going to want to go onto those websites like the Princeton Review, Kaplan Review, and Blueprint and look at their different packages and see what works for you. We are still working here at CSUB to develop an on-site LSAT test prep. And when I have more information on that, I'd be happy to share that with students. But most of our students, particularly in the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, and especially now that there's so many ways to do prep online synchronously and asynchronously, are doing more of an online model to prep for their test. Some that even helps with their flexibility with their school and work schedule, as opposed to going in person. So I also would definitely recommend that you take a look at the different LSAT preparatory classes. What you need to think about is that you always want to do that about the summer before the fall application process. That way you have anywhere from about 3 to 6 months to completely dedicate to studying for the LSAT. The other thing that you're going to want to do is get familiar with each school's application. Some of them are going to ask pretty much all the same standard set of questions, but each school is unique, and some may want an additional statement from you. Some may have a couple of additional questions. So you're always going to want to be aware that there's some items that every school will get from you, like your transcripts, for instance, usually your letters of recommendation, your personal statement, if you've crafted one that it can go to any of the schools. But you still want to look through the application for each of the schools that you're applying to in the event they are asking for something specific. The other thing that you're going to want to do is pull official transcripts from every institution of higher learning you attended. Even if you only took one class at another 4-year or a JC, it doesn't matter. As long as you attended that institution as a student, you will need to turn in that transcript to the law schools. You're also going to want to, and again, let me say this about transcripts. I know sometimes students might be a little hesitant. Maybe you had a bad semester, a bad year. They're looking at your growth, your trajectory. You know, did something go on maybe freshman or sophomore year, and then we're seeing real steady progress and dedication in this student? What are the rigor of their classes? So that is something for you to be thinking about as you're choosing your major, as you're choosing your classes, as maybe you work out of a bit of a hard time that you had. The other thing too that you can always do in your applications is attach an addendum to explain perhaps a bad semester and how now you have worked out of it. So, you know, the people reviewing your file are human. So they are aware that things like that do come up. So don't be nervous about that, but show that growth, show that upward trajectory. You also need to start thinking about your letters of recommendation. So you're going to need, depending on the school, 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. I always tell students to get 3. 2 should absolutely come from professors that you've built a relationship with and that can speak favorably of you and can really discuss the quality of your classwork, because that's what they're looking for. Then if you have, perhaps you did an internship, perhaps for even a law firm as an undergrad, you can get a letter from a professional resource, reference that talks about your work ethic, talks about the different types of experiences you have and how they create a good fit for you in law school. This also gives you the opportunity, if you haven't been engaging with your professors, to do so, or if you're out of your bachelor's program and it's been a little while and you're here this afternoon listening, don't be hesitant. Email the faculty you used to have, reintroduce yourself, remind them, who it is that you are, an assignment that you did. But the point is that, you're always wanting to be cultivating those professional relationships, because your professors are going to serve as part of your network for you, that are going to help you get into law school via these letters of recommendation, serving as a reference educationally and professionally. I still serve for a reference for my students who have now graduated law school. And so getting into that habit of creating good binding relationships with your faculty is really, really important. And they're here to support you. And you always want to be sure to ask that they can write a favorable letter. And I always tell students, make sure you give them plenty of notice, 2 to 3 weeks advance notice. Make sure that when they say yes, then you're supplying them with a refresher in the email of the classes that you took, what you earned, if there was a particular assignment that you were very proud of. But give them information, set them up for success so that they could write as strong of a letter for you as possible. You're also going to want to submit your resume as part of your application packet. And this is important because sometimes students, and it's understandable, they get very focused on their academics, and their resume just speaks to their academics, which is very important. But remember, while you are in your undergraduate career, you also want to be working on your professional career and seeing how it is the classes that you've taken, enhance that professional experience, and vice versa. So make sure that you're getting involved in campus. If you're part of a student club, if, like I said, you've done an internship or an externship, taken on a student leadership position, that way you have things on paper that start to paint a picture of yourself for the law school. Then you're also going to want to put together a 2-page, double-spaced personal statement. You're wanting this to be substantive yet brief. They are looking through many of these. They're not wanting this huge, long life story. What it is the admissions personnel is looking for is, is there some experience you went through that is unique, that you can link to your desire to go to law school, that demonstrates that you are a good fit for this program? I'll give you an example from a director of admissions personnel that I had worked with, and I was actually had them here to CSUB, and they gave an information session to the Pre-Law Society, which I encourage you to join. I will state what my email is at the end of this presentation, and you can always email me and I will get you connected with our student officers. But one of the things that the admissions personnel shared with me was, with regards to this personal statement, is that they are looking for fit. They are looking for how it is someone's experiences thus far has drawn them to the law, why they're attracted to the law. And so one of the anecdotal stories that the admissions personnel gave me was they received a personal statement from a ballerina. You may think, geez, a ballerina going to law school? Well, what happened is the theater production company that she worked for was putting people through layoffs, and some of the crew thought unnecessarily or not justified, but they were in a bind because they were not unionized. And she started to research the law, and through her experience in that, she decided, you know what, I want to go to law school and be able to advocate for for artists, essentially, like herself, dancers, people who work in theater that don't have the backing of an employment union to help secure employment rights or give them the ability to get into arbitration, meaning a way of dialogue to settle disputes. Now, you might not have something like that, and that's fine, but you're an interesting person. You're complex, you're nuanced. Sit with yourself and really think, why is it that I want to go to law school, and how can I put this in to 2 pages? Don't be afraid to let a trusted faculty member take a look at it and give you some constructed feedback. I'm also available to do that too. Another thing too that you're going to want to do through the LSAC is the credential assembling service. This acts as a dossier. And what that means, it's kind of a one-stop shop. All of your letters of recommendation will go to the credential assembly service. Your personal statement, if it's general, where it can go to every law school you apply to, will go to that service. Your transcripts will go to that service. So basically, you'll be applying to law schools, but they will pull all of that other information from the Credential Assembly Service. And you can register for that through the Law School Admissions Council. That is an additional fee that usually costs around $175, but it's well worth it. And it's the industry standard, to be very honest with you, on how to get all of those official documents to your law schools that you're applying to. Okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about the traditional application cycle. One thing is despite what I'm about to say, please always keep in your mind that it's never too early to start thinking about law school, right? We have students who are freshmen that are thinking about law school, high school students that are thinking about law school. So it's never too early to start. And I would really advise you to take advantage of some of our programs here at CSUB to help you really discern your vocation in the law. So for example, every spring we have our Court Observer program where students are down at the Superior Court working with mentoring judges, observing court proceedings, having time with different actors that help the court system, whether it's the district attorney's office, the public defender's office, the CEO of the Superior Court, legal research attorneys that work for judges. So, and also the staff of the court, the chief information officer of the court. And again, some of those careers I just mentioned are ones that demand a law degree, and some of them don't. So again, sitting with yourself and really discerning this process is so important, because we want you to be passionate about what you're doing, and we want you to be happy about what you're doing, because that's when you'll be doing your life's work, right? So, but in terms of really starting to prepare yourself, immerse yourself. That's part of the preparation. We also have the CSUB Legal Information and Support Clinic, where we have students out in the field helping people navigate the legal process and the legal system, particularly people who don't have the resources to really get legal advice. And so we have students who are working in housing discrimination, students who are working in family law, students that are working in criminal law and in immigration. And that the clinic is something that we offer an internship for each fall and spring semester. And the Court Observer program is every spring semester. So again, I'll go ahead and before I sign off, I'll state what my email is and ask that you please contact me, and I'd be more than happy to give you additional information on that. So I'm going to talk about the law school application cycle in a traditional year, but know that there are times where depending on your unique circumstances, you might not be able to follow this. And there's always this kind of rolling spring admissions process that law schools tend to have. This is the process that for the opening fall push of applications, how it works. So usually your junior year of your college career, you start to think about law school more seriously. Our Pre-Law Society, when we are able, does campus visits to law schools in California, sits in on classes. Again, that exposure is part of this too. Start to research LSAT prepped options. And this really gets more serious the spring of your junior year. That way, by summer, the test prep program that you're going to do, your calendar of how you're going to study over the summer and when you're going to take the LSAT. Are you going to take the LSAT in October? There's usually an October date now. There's usually a November date. Like for example, the October one coming up is the 9th, the November one coming up is around the 13th. There's always a January date, February date, a March date. Again, I encourage you to, if you can, if it's feasible, to try to go in the traditional cycle, because again, depending on your GPA and your LSAT score, that's when you have that kind of pot of merit-based funding tends to be the freshest at schools. So by the summer, you should be engaged in your LSAT prep. You should also be researching different law schools that you are considering, re-engaging yourself with faculty if it's been a little while. Then the fall of your senior year, that's when you take the LSAT, either in October or November. And I encourage you to do that in the event that you need to retake it. Right now, they are permitting students to take it up to 3 times within a single year. You do want to be careful on how many times you retake the LSAT, because that can start to signal to schools that this may not be the fit for you. So if you have to take it one time, retake it one time or so, or cancel your score, that's not a big deal at all. But that's just something to be mindful about. You also want to begin pulling documents for the CAS, the Credential Assembling Service that I talked to you about. So those are things like your transcripts from any and all institutions of higher education that you've been lining up favorable letter writers. Again, you're going to want at least 2 faculty from your university or community college experience. And then you're also, if you are able to, or you would like, you can get a professional reference that can also speak to, your experience. Your academic ones will speak to your academic ability. And you also want to start thinking about that personal statement. And you're going to want to be thinking about these things for a while, so you have the time to get your application drafted, review it several times, maybe have 1 or 2 people look over your personal statement and provide you feedback, have ample time to study for the LSAT, and ample time to decide if you are happy with the score. You usually get it within about a month. Many schools too have rolling admissions into spring. So say that you're wanting to start law school in the fall of 2022. There are some law schools that will go ahead and accept an application in February of 2022. So you're going to want to go onto the law school websites for each school that you're interested in, look at their fall dates for application submission for the next fall, and look at their spring dates. You start to get acceptance decisions in early spring. And that is also too when you'll find out if you were admitted or not. And then some of the schools that you might have been really competitive with, you might be waitlisted on. And they're just trying to see where it is that their admissions falls out to know how many, or if any at all, they're going to open up from the wait list and actually admit them into their program. So that's something else to think about. But this is the traditional cycle of the law school admissions process. A couple of things too that I want to talk about actually before these COVID updates is, to just remember when you are, taking the LSAT, that you'll see this exam and it's scored between 120 to 180 points. That's why it's so important, whether you're thinking about a state bar accredited law school or an ABA accredited law school, to do a couple of things before you even start the test prep. And that is go onto those schools' websites and again, look at what was the average GPA from their most recently admitted class and what was the median, like boom, right there in the middle LSAT score. And that gives you a baseline. And I'd also encourage you to go on to the lsac.org website or the Khan Academy and take a diagnostic test cold, because that'll let you know, okay, am I weak in logic and logical reasoning? Am I weak in the analogical section? Where is it that I am weak and I need to do the most improving and dedicating my time? The other thing is over the summer, while you are doing your LSAT prep, again, that's coming out of your junior year into your senior year, if you're following that trajectory, you are going to want to also be practicing timed test, right? Because for each of these sections, you only have 35 minutes. And so you're going to also want to just get into a disciplined routine and time yourself so that you know how to work within those constraints. So these are things to really be considering. And there are things to also be thinking about, again, when you are perusing and comparing LSAT prep programs. We have to talk about COVID-19 updates. So here, I've had admissions personnel tell me that the early bird gets the worm. They recommend that you start the application process early because we're still in a fluid space with the pandemic. And regionally, there's areas where cases are higher of COVID, some that are lower, and that can all impact staff ability at these law schools and how fast they're able to process your application, or they may be in a bind staff-wise and it may be moving a little slow. So they encourage students to get things in on time and even early in regards to the components of your application. That way too, if for some reason a letter writer might be a little delayed or other things, you have the time to remind them of what the due dates are. So just remember, this is also an opportunity for you to become even more organized than you already are and be very good about your checklist and your timeline, which you are going to need those skills when you are in law school, no doubt, and you will definitely need them when you're an attorney working with clients. And so this is a great opportunity for you to just sharpen those organization skills, those time management skills. So again, early bird gets the worm. Start that application process early. You're also going to want to just provide time for mail and just different system updates that everybody is going through, because our world has been changing due to COVID-19. Also, some staff is working remotely. Not everybody is on site. And so these are things for you to think about. The LSAT Flex is something that is basically continuing. It was, a solution at first during the height of the pandemic about a year ago, when we still needed to have the LSAT, but we were not having it, in person. I told you in the summer of 2019, the major transformation of the LSAT is that it went digitally, but we were still in person taking it. You're just taking it on a tablet. Well, then less than a year later, like not 9 months later, you still were taking it digitally, but now remotely, right? And that was the LSAT Flex, and that's essentially going to be staying that option, it looks like, through about June of 2022. And that is where you go through the lsac.org site, you go through the Law Hub option on that website, and you go ahead and you make an account, and that's where you would take the LSAT. You can register for your test date there. You can peruse the interface and make sure that your computer is up to date. They even give you instructions on, okay, what are the kind of the best operating machines to take the LSAT remotely. And then remember that it is proctored by ProctorU. And so I would definitely take some time to make sure that you are staying up to date with all the new technology requirements of the LSAT, and what, if any, even more changes might be happening by the time you take the exam. The other thing too is, say that you defer your decision. And some people have done that within this last year because of the pandemic. You're going to want to keep in touch with the school. Some schools will let you defer. And what that means is, say you get accepted for fall of 2022, something happens and you're asking, oh, I need to now start in fall of 2023. Some schools will permit a deferral, some schools will not. And so don't make the assumption that they all will. Stay in regular communications with the admissions office. Some are putting short constraints on deferrals because they're starting to see an uptick in applications and also just navigating this new environment. So you're going to want to make sure that you're staying engaged. There's even ways to stay virtually engaged. There's virtual law fairs if you go on to the Law School Admissions Council website. Also, to some, law schools may permit you to observe a class. If you can't do it in person as a prospective law school student, they may allow you to do it, virtually, for instance. So you're going to want to reach out to these schools, make sure that you're very aware of their COVID-19 updates. Outside of those traditional components of the application process, see if there's anything in addition that a law school needs. And so that's the overall picture of the law school admissions process. I hope that you found this recording informational. I hope that it demystified the process. People tend to have questions after sessions like this. That's normal. Things like this usually spur up more questions. And so please feel free to contact me at jkraybill@csub.edu. That's jkraybill@csub.edu. Just say, hey, Professor Kraybill, I was able to view your recording on the basics of the law school admissions process. I have some more questions. When would be a good time for us to set up a Zoom meeting or a phone call? And I would be more than happy to assist. I want you to know that no matter what, not finances, not anything, don't let this ever be an obstacle to you. You're worthy of pursuing your dreams. We here in Kern County are in a legal desert, which means we have more people in need of legal services than attorneys to assist them. And so one thing I would encourage you is to not only think about a career in law school, but think about returning back to Kern County and really serving a community that so needs talented legal advocates. So I want to congratulate you once again on getting this far in discerning your vocation in law school. I'm here to support you. Please reach out and make sure you take good care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes, looks like we have finished the video, and we will now go ahead and head back over to the main session.